Right. I have the absolute pleasure to welcome Reilly McAdams to the channel. Thank you very much for joining us. If you are not following him on Twitter yet, you are missing out. I'll put the link below. That's probably the easiest thing, but it's Reilly_McAdams on Twitter. Join that, follow that handle, and he is the most insightful man I have met who knows everything about the Bigbear AI partnership, which quite frankly hasn't gotten that much coverage, I feel. I think a lot of people don't understand it. A lot of people just think, oh, is that just another customer? What's really going on there? And I'd love it if you explain to us a little bit about what that company is. We look a little bit at how the corporation is actually going to work. And people are definitely asking also why. So maybe if you could, right, if you could start off just a little bit like, what is Bigbear AI? What is this company? What do they actually do?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks Felix for having me on. Just before we kind of start, just a little background about myself. I'm a 21-year-old college student. I've been investing for about 4 years now, trading on the side too. And I'm part of the Pounding the Table network. And so we kind of just go through all these companies that are very small. But yeah, so Bigbear is, one of my favorite ones because they're in such a fast growing TAM. So they're in the AI, machine learning, and like data analytics field. And so essentially Bigbear AI is about 4 companies in one. It was brought together by a man named Reggie Brothers, who we'll get into later. And so it started with New Wave, which is a AI and machine learning company. And then they put together Bigbear, which is the name. And that was a big data company, which we'll get into that also. And then PCI, which is cloud and cyber engineering. And then you have ProModel, which is also an AI and machine learning company. And so they brought these 4 companies together right before the SPAC merger. So essentially right before they announced, essentially it would just be these 4 companies put into one, which is very, very unique, at least to me. I thought that was very unique, and that's kind of what drove me to kind of look into them. And so for product suites, it basically includes data ingestion, processing of the machine learning and the AI. Then you have the predictive analytics, which is very, very important in today's market. And then you have the customers would be in intelligence and basically defense. And then you also have the commercial aspect with the enterprise. And we'll get into that too, because they recently actually just got version orbit, which is a very, very nice grab for them. Yeah, so like that's kind of a little intro into Bigbear.
Okay, cool. I should have said this at the very beginning. I should always say, guys, it's not financial advice. Be smart. Check the facts that we're talking about. These are just our opinions and our research. So always be smart about that. And I should also have said at the beginning, I've got a free webinar running this weekend, which will teach you how to earn consistent income from options trading. So make sure you join us for that. Go to felixfriends.org/webinar. It won't be on YouTube, so you'll miss out unless you go to felixfriends.org/webinar. So no, I really appreciate that overview there. So they're kind of a big data AI cloud predictive kind of company.
Yeah. So like I think you've probably gone into Palantir a little bit. I think that's kind of the best comp for them. So I think that they do focus on defense right now. And they're kind of getting into enterprise, like I just said. They recently got version orbit, and so they're trying to expand that out. And so what they're doing with the SPAC merger is they're going to take the cash that they have, and they're going to be able to scale it a little bit more on the enterprise side, which is very important because they do have the government contracts already. They have a very large backlog. It's about 500 million, and then they have about $5 billion in like near-term contracts that they could get in the future. But for them right now, for scaling it as fast as they can, is to get these commercial clients, and I think that they're really trying to hammer that down post SPAC merger.
Okay, the SPAC is GIG, right? Yeah, GIG is the SPAC ticker for anybody who hasn't looked into that before.
So the vote for the merger will be on the 3rd of December, and the ticker change will be BBAI. So kind of unique. I thought it was going to be Bear, but I'm fine with BBAI.
Okay, and you can see the stock chart here. So basically, they started in a long time ago. In this is an old SPAC, right?
This is a pretty old SPAC.
Run up
The
to
2018 shouldn't have been there. I think it should start around June, July, around that time. I think that might be it. It
okay.
could be.
So maybe there's some old data
Yeah,
in there
it's
in the chart here.
tough to chart some of these SPACs, but
Yeah. So it probably starts around about here, and then it's run up a little bit, but not a lot. So 9.99. Like, I mean, like a lot of SPACs at the moment, actually, they're not necessarily moving much till the merger is done, right?
yeah, exactly. And I think that they're starting to get a little bit more eyes on it after this Palantir news. I think a lot of people who are interested in Palantir, they're kind of looking towards something else too. And I mean, we're going to get into it later, but I mean, Bigbear is a very, very cheap stock. That's kind of why I also gravitated towards it. Palantir does have the multiple, and it's a fair multiple, I think, for the market that it's in. But also, you got to look at other players like Bigbear AI who are in the same market that are much, much cheaper.
So, I mean, before we dig deeper into like AI and what they actually do and what they've done, I think the single most frequent question I've had from our Palantir community is, I thought Bigbear is a competitor. Why
Mm-hmm.
would you partner with somebody? Does that mean that Palantir's own product isn't good enough? Is that why they need to partner?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question. I think that they really see Bigbear as a competitor, and so I think that they wanted to try and do something with them. And I think that they do have similar platforms, but they also can kind of complement each other. And so we'll get into it later. But essentially, Bigbear is a little bit more. They have a lot of different things in their ecosystem, I guess. And so pairing that with Palantir's like Foundry and Apollo, those things that they have, I think that it can kind of complement each other. And a lot of the clients that they have and future clients, they're going to really like what they've brought together. Plus, they've also mentioned that they're going to do joint ventures later on, which could be really cool to see them bring new products to market. But no, I mean, I think that it was more of a strategic move. I think that if Bigbear was a public company already, I think they probably would have already got acquired by Palantir. But since it's kind of in a weird time where they're still in a SPAC and they still are, yet to merge, I think that kind of brought them to the point where it's, maybe we'll just partner with them instead of let's actually just acquire them outright. And I mean, I think it's a good move on Palantir's part, and I think that Bigbear is also going to win in this type of partnership. So I think it's a win-win for both parties.
Okay. So I mean, my feeling is always that Palantir's real strength lies in the whole like data ingestion kind of side, right? That's sort of where they're coming from. That's sort of how I see that. And then they seem to plug in all these specialists who are then able to take that platform to the next level. Would you say that's off, or what are your thoughts?
No, I mean, I think that's kind of what I was thinking too. And I mean, I kind of want to just show a little bit of the use cases that I was very impressed with the platform that Bigbear has. And I think this is kind of why Palantir was really interested in. And so, for example, they predicted the Russian invasion of Crimea before it even happened, which is very incredible. I think that that's something that a lot of people should kind of look at and be like, wow, that's actually impressive. And then they also have a mirror.
This was sort of it wasn't a real invasion, was it? It was sort of like a salami tactic, kind of like, we'll send a few people and then they haven't got uniforms. We send a bit of police, a bit of military police, and then
exactly. And
the population
they're just watching over them. It's kind of like a Big Brother type situation where you're just looking over what's happening. And I think it's just nice to know, and I think the government sees that, and that's why they're starting to get these contracts too. But they also have this maritime intelligence platform that is extremely effective. And so the platform can discover irregular shipping behavior, predict the capacity of ports for future operations, identify smuggling, those types of things where, like, in today's economy, the being able to look over these ports is very important, and being able to, direct where these ships are going and everything like that, and being able to help with the supply chain. So they actually started this in the past year, and the maritime logistics revenue is up 80 times in just under a year. That's pretty, it's incredible growth. And I think that that's just the start. I think that they could kind of do a lot with this. So they basically, when they bought Bigbear, it's a geospatial essentially analytics platform that they got with that. And so that's where this maritime logistics is able to, be a revenue stream because of that acquisition of Bigbear. So Bigbear alone was a very, very impressive company. And I think when you brought it together to pair with New Wave, which is the other bigger company out of those two, and you put them together, I think it became a very, very impressive company and a very impressive platform.
Okay, cool. Okay, that's pretty yeah, some impressive use cases there. What they've done, 80 times growth is not to be sniffed at in maritime logistics. So how did you come across Bigbear? I mean, this is
yeah,
how do you
it's a pretty
stumble
funny
across
story.
something like this?
So I think it was around like July, June. I was in the mall near home in Chicago, and so I was just out on my lunch break, going to Panda Express. I was just eating orange chicken, which a lot of people who know me would know that that's one of my favorite things. But I was just scrolling through my phone, and I just see that Gig Capital, all of a sudden they're merging with this little Bigbear company that it's in AI and machine learning, and like, knowing me, I've been very interested in like AI and like Palantir before. And so like I was thinking, maybe it could be one of the competitors. And as I researched into it, I was very impressed with it. And, I think that was kind of part of the things. So when I look for companies, I look at the trends before I even really look at the companies, and just knowing that the AI and machine learning industry is just growing very, very rapidly. I believe that the total addressable market's around 50, 60 billion now. And by 2026, it will be around 310 billion. So very, very impressive growth. And so I've been waiting for a chance to get into a cheap company in that industry. And when Bigbear came along, I had a pounce on it. And basically no one has talked about it over the last maybe 5 months until this Palantir news came out on Monday.
Right. Okay. So it was sort of half accident, but you actually done some homework
it was
before,
100%.
Right?
It was an accident, but turned into something that I did quite a bit of research on, and that's when I really started to fall in love with it.
Cool. Okay. That's really. I mean, a lot of the time we find things by accident, right? I mean, like a lot of my biggest investment is because I had a conversation with somebody and they mentioned it, and I was like, oh, I should look into that. And then you actually do, and then that becomes your biggest holding or something. So yeah, it's kind of crazy what can happen. I think it'd be great because you've done all the research, and a lot of people who are watching haven't. Talk us through a little bit more about the team, and I'll also pull up here.
Yeah.
I'll try to do that on the screen. You should pull up the guys here.
Yeah. So Dr. Reggie Brothers is the CEO. So he's had 30 plus years of experience as a science and technology innovator. He was a former CTO at Patreon, undersecretary for Secret Service and DHS, Department Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research. And he was awarded the WASH 100, which is an award for the most influential leader in the government market for 2021. He also got an award for strategic acquisition, thanks to putting these 4 companies together, which everyone in the space, not the investors, retail investors like that, but the people who actually know what they do and in the government, they all are crowning him for this big 4-way merger. I think that it was very impressive for, someone like that to be able to put these companies together and what they've built on top of it. And then you have Brian Frucci, who's the CTO, and he has 25 years of experience in technology and big data. So he used to work for New Wave as well as Dr. Reggie Brothers. And he also worked for Oracle, which is a fairly big company. A lot of people should know who that is.
Yes.
And then you have Josh Kinley, who is the CFO. He used to work at PCI, which I mentioned before. That's part of the merger. And essentially, he has 20 years experience in the government for finance and accounting. So all 3 of these guys, they have a lot of background in the government, as you probably could see. And so I think that you could kind of tell that, Bigbear on the surface is definitely a government company. But that's kind of why they wanted to bring in the SPAC management group, and also, do the partnership with Palantir, is so then they could get other people who, have that expertise in the enterprise and the commercial sector, where they can actually, go out and get these new clients on top of the government contracts that they already have and that they are going to get.
I mean, given that these guys all have government and sort of semi-military government kind of backgrounds, would you think that maybe the US government sort of gives Palantir a call and say, hey, we're using this software and they're brilliant, maybe you guys should do something together? You think there might be that sort of nudge?
Yeah, I think that that's definitely the case. And I think that you could kind of see, so like Palantir has already said before that they've mentioned Bigbear's name, and Bigbear has mentioned Palantir quite a bit. And one of the key stats with Bigbear is 90% of their entire workforce has high level clearance in the government. So the government is very comfortable with letting them, have these bigger contracts too. And as they grow and as they get this cash and are able to expand even more and can take on these bigger contracts, they're going to continue to get these massive contracts that Palantir is getting already. So, you kind of see how they're very similar in ways. And I think that that's kind of where I gravitated towards buying them, is because they kind of are a young Palantir, maybe 5-6 years ago. So that's kind of why I really do like to invest in something like this, where you have, the big player like Palantir, and then you have the little guy who's growing faster than the big guy. And so that's kind of why I like to invest in this kind of company.
And getting the recognition from the big guy, really. I mean, it's
Exactly.
it's a big, like, okay, well done you from Palantir, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Could you talk us through a little bit now, some numbers on this?
Of course. So yeah, the annual revenue right now, so for 2021, it will be around 175 million to 180 million. Some of their contracts this year are getting pushed back to early next year, so I'm not too worried about that. And then you also have 2022 numbers, which would be 277 million. So very, very good growth, around 50-60%. Then it goes up to 388 for 2023, 550 for 2024, and then 764 in 2025. And this is all organic. They have yet to acquire anyone else into the company. But like I said before, Reggie Brothers has that award for strategic acquisitions, and they've already said that they are targeting 25 companies that account for about 360 million in annual revenue. So they are going to be active after this SPAC merger with using the cash that they have. So I'm very impressed with that, and them saying, we're actually going to go out and build on to the growth that they have. And so gross margins right now are about 43%, but the future margins will be around 60%, a little bit over 60%. And so they have the core business of analytics, which is 58% gross margins. And by 2025, they're expecting around 70%, which is very, very high. And that will be the core business. A little bit on the free cash flow. So for 2021, they'll be at 18 million. Next year, they'll be at 2023 or in 2022.
Sorry, Reilly, you surprised me there. They're actually cash flow positive at this early stage?
Yes, they are.
Wow.
And the CAGR over the next 4 or 5 years is 60%. So in 2022, they have a free cash flow of 23 million. 2023, they'll be at 43 million. And then 2024, 77. So a really big jump. And then in 2025, they'll be 120 million. So a 60% CAGR free cash flow. Great numbers there, huh? That was really one of the things.
I mean, one of my key things is always free cash flow, and some people laugh at me and say there's a value investor stuck in there somewhere, but it's just when a company has free cash flow, they can survive a lot of bumps down the road.
Exactly.
Because they're not reliant on capital market. It could be we get a massive crash tomorrow. Capital markets are closed for 2 years. A lot of startups will just die, right? But if you have positive free cash flow, you don't really care, because maybe you can't do some of these acquisitions and some of the expansion, but you'll still be here. And that's really the really important thing. And it's very rare that you see young companies, or very few SPACs as well, with free cash flow, right? It's always just sort of like, we haven't really made anything yet, but next year we'll make $1 billion, promise. Well, sort of, So yeah, that's quite exciting. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. And kind of just laying it out as a comparable. So in 2018, Palantir did 595 million. 2019, they did 742 million. And then in 2020, they did 1.09 billion, which is very near what the estimate for Bigbear is over the next couple of years. So in 2018, in 2024, they're expecting 550 million, which is just shy of where Palantir was. And in 2019, Palantir would have been short 22 million of Bigbear's 2025 estimate of 764 million, if that makes sense. And so this is without the actual acquisitions that I was mentioning.
Okay, so similar revenue trajectory, or they're probably basing it also on the Palantir numbers to show, hey, look, this is possible, right? From a government
Yeah,
sector, that kind
yeah,
of thing.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
And
cool.
back to a little bit to the margin. So right now, like I said, it's around 40%. And so over the next couple of years, it goes 43%, 46%, 52%, 57, and then in 2025, 62% on that 764 billion. So the margins are growing fairly fast, or at least they're
Mm,
expected to be. And like a lot of people are a little skeptical of the numbers that these SPACs are coming out with, but this is a data analytics company. They
yeah,
live and breathe the numbers, and so if any company is going to have pretty accurate numbers, it's going to be a data analytics company.
yeah. And if you look at the software space, I mean, sort of a 60% gross profit margin is pretty realistic. I mean, that's what you
Yeah,
should be going for, because
yeah, exactly.
you're not when you're scaling up, you're not building buildings or production lines. You're buying laptops basically, right? It's not like
Yeah,
you're going to
exactly.
spend all that much money.
Yeah, and like the last number that I really focus on is the cash that they're going to have, because I do expect that they will be active in the acquisition market. And so they have 110 million of debt that will be paid off in the SPAC transaction. That will leave them about 132 million in cash. Plus, they're going to do a $200 million convertible note. So the cash will be around 330 million. So it's quite
Okay.
a bit of cash that they're going to have to be able to go out there, hire more people, and add on to the growth that they have with these acquisitions that's expected.
Okay. So that's those 25 potential targets. I mean, they're probably not going to buy all 25, but
No,
you
no,
know,
absolutely not. I hope they don't. I think that they're growing well organically. That they don't really need to go out there and just add another 10 different companies. But if they see certain aspects that can actually benefit the clients, both in the government and for enterprise, then they're going to go out and do it, because they have cash and they have the knowledge and they have the experience of bringing in new companies and adding them onto the platform and being successful in doing it.
yeah. Have you been able to figure out the market cap? Because it's always a challenge with SPACs,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes.
You look at the
So
numbers and it confuses people, because what you see on a stock ticker for SPACs, that market cap is nonsense. It's got nothing to
yes,
do with the
so.
post-merger valuation,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the market cap is only $1.56 billion, which is very, very low compared to Palantir, who's around, I think, 40 billion last time I checked,
45, I
around
think.
that.
Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that.
so it's a very, very big difference. And just a little number to put in your head is it would take about a 30 times or I guess 300 or 3,000% increase on Big Bear's market cap to just equal Palantir. So, it's a
Mm.
very, very big difference. So that's kind of what brought me to say, you know what, I'd rather go long Big Bear instead of Palantir, even though I do like Palantir in the space that it's in. It's just more of a value play for me is to go long Big Bear, who's in the same space, growing faster actually, and has projections that are essentially where Palantir was the last 4 or 5 years. So, that's kind of why
Mm.
I really like this company and where they're going. And they've executed better than what I even imagined over the last 5 months. So, I've added consistently to my position.
Okay. So essentially 1.5 billion market cap, Big Bear, 45 billion, Palantir. So if you think the growth trajectory is similar, then in theory you have a very, very high upside there. Okay,
Yeah.
I get that. So you mentioned earlier briefly the Virgin Orbit client. Can you
Yeah,
share
yeah.
something more about that?
So Big Bear essentially they received a $150 million contract from Virgin Orbit, which, like we just mentioned, the market cap of 1.5 billion. It's essentially 10% of their entire market cap. But so Virgin Orbit essentially is a company that will basically shoot satellites up into space, and so they're
Mm.
essentially a space company in itself. And so it kind of got Big Bear into the space industry a little bit, where they can kind of provide their data analytics to a company that's going to be putting in probably thousands of satellites over the next decade. And they're going to be able to use that Big Bear technology, the geospatial platform and everything that they have. And they're going to be able to use that or they're going to be able to essentially sell that to Virgin Orbit where they can use it as well. And so it's kind of cool to see them get such a big client. And just for people who don't know about the Virgin Brands, so the Virgin Brands is a conglomerate that is comprised of 400 companies with well over $21 billion in revenue every year. So these 400 companies, they all are very unique, but all of them can essentially use the data analytics that Bigbear offers. So to me, Virgin Orbit is just one of many, many, many potential clients that they have just from this one deal. So the 150 million is only for Virgin Orbit, but I couldn't imagine what they can get from all these other Virgin brands, along with whoever else that they get, thanks to this Palantir partnership too, who's going to be able to bring them new clients, because everyone knows Palantir, but they didn't know what Bigbear was until now.
Okay, so the way you see the integration, is it the classic sort of like most of the partnerships we've seen? Everything is run on Foundry. They tie in additional products, whether this is, IBM or any of the other big partnerships. Is that how you see this sort of structured?
I think that the way that it's going to kind of be structured is they're going to feed off each other. And so Palantir's Foundry platform will be integrated with Bigbear's Observe, Orient, and Dominant products. So it's going to create a very powerful machine learning extension for the Palantir ecosystem. And then on the Bigbear, and Bigbear will have an opportunity to extend Palantir's products with its forecasting, course of action, optimization, computer vision, natural language processing, and all these other predictive analytics low code interfaces that they have. And one of the big things that I like about Bigbear is how fast that they can implement their system. So Palantir is usually around, I believe it's like 6 to 12 months to implement their entire system for these companies, or even in the government. And for Bigbear, their average is under a month. So they're able to go into these companies and they're able to build the platform for them, within a very, very short amount of time. And so I think that's what got Palantir very interested in them. So they're able to essentially integrate their stuff with Bigbear's to allow for the easy integration and the very fast integration. And on the other end, Bigbear now has a very large ecosystem that they can essentially go out and sell to their clients as well, thanks to Palantir. So it's a very, very big partnership on both ends. And I think that they're going to really like each other, I guess, if that makes sense. It's going to mesh very, very well.
Yeah, this sounds almost more like joint venture than partnership, doesn't it? I mean, if you think,
yeah.
I get what you're saying about the acceleration of rollouts. I think Palantir have actually made a lot of improvement on that. And if you listen to the last few earnings calls, they've got clients now who they got online in like 48 hours and stuff. So I think they've moved away from the 6 month to a shorter time period. But obviously that is a challenge, especially if you go into a new sector here. So it almost sounds to me like, if this thing is worth 1.5 billion and it's that great, why didn't Palantir just buy them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised too. I think that they had to be on their mind at one point, but I don't know. I think that maybe we can see after the SPAC merger that they're going to actually maybe acquire them, or I think the best case for them would be to wait until after the merger happens and then essentially take a very large stake in Bigbear, maybe 10, 15, 20%. So they don't need to put it onto their entire, or they don't need to essentially acquire them, but their stake in Bigbear can grow faster than what it could if it was actually under Palantir's, umbrella, I guess, if that makes sense. So their stock really won't move just because of Bigbear, but their stake in Bigbear can move a lot faster and a lot more, being on itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there's also some benefit in, when you bring these sort of startups into a bigger environment, you often kill them, right? I think that's what happens to a lot of the great businesses that get gobbled up by, I don't know, Microsoft and Google and whoever every single day. So I think there is this idea nowadays where you just keep them separate and alive, and that way they actually create the brilliance that they have created. So there might be something in on that. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to watch whether, maybe next time Bigbear raises 100 million, maybe that 100 million comes from Palantir or something.
Yeah.
And it would then become part of sort of this Palantir ETF almost, right? They've invested into so many different companies.
They've invested in so many things. Yeah.
Yeah. But those are typically more end users that I sort of see where they think you're creating something very unique and disruptive in an industry. And if we can make you successful, not only do we make a lot of money from that, from a service, but also from our investment, and then we can supply everybody in your industry because we are, we created the disruptor. Whereas this seems to be a bit different. This seems to be more like a bit more of a tech add-on that would, improve the product and probably the way I read this from what you've now sort of shared with us, I almost see whether Palantir is thinking here of the government sector, because this whole AI drive, I mean, that's getting so much money and so much noise from the military side, and I'm sure the rest of the federal government, that it might just give them that bit extra to become the preferred supplier, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Bigbear's, they're very, very smart with the government, and I think that it allows Palantir to also, sorry about that, it allows them to essentially have
some drama.
Yeah.
We couldn't show the analyst; he was is on the run.
Yeah, so no, I think it allows Palantir to have a little bit more government expertise, and I think Alex Karp is very smart when it comes to the enterprise, and he's able to get these very high value clients, like you probably have talked about. And so I think that also helps Bigbear, and it also helps Palantir, where they kind of mesh together, help each other on different ends. Like we talked about earlier, the management team is basically all government guys, and so it kind of allows Palantir to have that inside scoop, I guess, into the government a little bit more than what they have. And so also you mentioned that they invest in all these different companies, and Bigbear is one of those companies that they can essentially invest in, that they can use, unlike Sarcos Robotics, who it's a very, very cool company, but at the same time, like, it really doesn't do too much for Palantir right now, at least. But Bigbear, on the other hand, right now, it's helping them right away. So I think that that's kind of the interesting aspect of that partnership.
Definitely. Well, I mean, there are some serious, $1 billion plus contracts up for grabs at present for the whole rejig of the US military and everything else. So yeah, if you have this joint venture and suddenly that means you have an extra 10% chance of getting those deals, I mean, that alone would definitely make that an appealing partnership. So he said this is really quite, because when I first read it, I thought, it's just another partnership. It's another S&P or another Accenture or IBM or whoever else is out there, AWS and so on. Okay, they're just gonna somehow tie together their products. Both sides win. Marvelous, not that exciting. And then I read your point by point posts on really what this is all about, and I was like, hey, this is actually very different. This is the first such Palantir partnership that I've really seen, where it's not, I want access to, like, with SAP or with IBM or something. Palantir is just saying, we want access to your 10,000 enterprise customers, right? Easy. It saves us building up a sales force. With Bigbear, that isn't really the case, because Bigbear's main customer is basically the US government, which Palantir know quite well. Though, I mean, I think a lot of people do forget Palantir is a bit of an outsider in the government as well. I know, despite the CIA funding, I mean, they had to sue their way into the Department of Defense.
I know, yeah.
So it wasn't a sort of a shoe-in, whereas it seems Bigbear, with their profile of guys here, Undersecretary for S&T at DHS, that's a very different connection level there. So that might also be, like, as you said, that might also be the real attraction for them there, is just to get that, be part of this whole AI build out that the US government is doing, and making sure that that doesn't end up with, one of the big defense contractors or something.
Yeah, and I think like C3AI, which is the other public AI company, I mean, Palantir could have went to them and partnered with them, but I think that they realized that they have an inferior product compared to Bigbear, and so that's why they went to Bigbear to implement them into their own system. So, like, to me, it kind of just shows that Palantir is obviously the number one. I don't think that that's not really a question, but I think it's kind of up for grabs on who the number two was. And so we just figured it out on Monday who Palantir really thought the number two player in the space was, and it's Bigbear. It's not C3AI. And just to kind of throw this out there, C3AI is still worth about $5 billion. And they're doing less, I think, maybe a little bit more revenue than Bigbear. They're around the same thing. So, I mean, it's very interesting to kind of see those on, kind of comparing them valuation wise, and just being able to see who has the better tech. And clearly Palantir believes that it's Bigbear. And I obviously think that it's Bigbear too, but some people still like C3AI, and I don't think that it's a bad company. But I think that Palantir kind of already just told everyone on Monday what they think is the number two player.
Absolutely. And the surprising thing is the gig stock hasn't moved all that much, right? I mean,
No,
We
I think
saw
that it's a lot of arbitrage. I'm sorry about that.
yeah.
Arbitrage, and so a lot of these big funds are essentially just trying to buy under NAV and trying to just sell on the redeem at $10. So they're kind of just playing games there. But if you look at the warrants went from around 70 cents about a month, 2 months ago, to now up to a high of about $1.60, $1.50, around that. I think it touched $1.75. So over 100% on the warrants, just in a matter of, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let me
So it's
just
just
show to you here.
incredible move there, and you could see the last 2-3 days. Essentially, it's gone up about what, 30%, 40%.
30% in one day. Yeah. So, by
Yeah,
the way, guys, if you don't realize it, for SPACs, there are usually 3 tickers, right? So there's, for this one, GIG, which is the stock, and then there's GIG GW. Normally, there's just one extra letter, and those are the warrants. And there's typically another one with a U, which you can more or less ignore. But yeah, so the warrant tickers are separate. You can always find them with the additional W at the end here. So yeah, massive movement there from the warrant side. Interesting. Did you buy warrants or stocks?
I only have warrants right now. Actually, I've been buying ever since July. I have not touched the commons yet, but probably late November, probably maybe even after the merger, I'll start to buy some commons. But I completely plan to redeem my warrants, and this is a 10, 20, 30-year hold for me from this valuation. So I mean, I think that it's a great position. Even, I mean, I think that at this point it's probably better to just buy the commons, considering it's still, you only have 2 weeks until the merger vote and probably 3-4 weeks until the actual IPO. But I think that either one can work, and I know a lot of people who still are buying, and I'm continuing to buy. I have no plans of stopping anytime soon, and I think that the Palantir news just got me even more into it. I think that just shows that they're executing exactly how I expected.
So when you redeem the warrants, what do you get for it? What's the...
Yeah, so essentially you could redeem these warrants for shares at $11.50 average on top of whatever you pay for the warrants. And so essentially one warrant would equal one common share. And so that's why, technically you could have thousands of warrants and then redeem them for thousands of shares, or you could end up selling these warrants at a premium and then just buying the commons after that instead of actually redeeming them. So, it kind of gives you 2 different ways to play it. And I think that, after the merger, it's not going to stay at $10. And I think a lot of people that like Palantir are probably just going to wait too for this merger in about a month. And then they probably will start to buy the commons, which, a lot of people have also bought options on it too. You could buy like in the money options, out of the money options on it. But, for me, I'm just more of a warrant guy when it comes to SPACs. I don't have too many SPACs, but Bigbear was one of those that, I have the most conviction out of any SPAC, at least right now. It's going to be Bigbear.
Cool. It's super interesting. It's completely flew below my radar. I mean, there are so many companies out there that I'm sure that do. But yeah, it's a really interesting one. I really, really appreciate, Reilly, that you broke this down for us here. And I think a very, very simple to understand way. And I'm sure a lot of the Palantir community is going to be really interested in looking at this and looking also at a SPAC here trading below $10, which is no guarantee for making money, but it's typically better than buying it at $30, right? So,
exactly. No,
very,
I mean,
very
thanks for having me on, Felix. This has been awesome. Nice to break it down with you.
No, absolute pleasure. We should definitely do this again. If you have something else out there that's interesting in this space or anything else, always shoot me a message.
Can't wait to watch your Neo breakdown. I mean, that's one of my favorites. It's a great company there.
It is. Let me just put your Twitter on the screen for everyone's benefit here. If you can you see this? I think everybody can. Reilly _ McAdams, an absolute treasure for stock information. So make sure you follow him on Twitter and don't miss out like I did, obviously, for some time here. So thanks very much for that. I really, really appreciate that. I will put this live as quickly as I can out there. So thanks very much for tuning in, Reilly, and I wish you a marvelous day. Keep digging and keep finding some great stocks and keep sharing them.
Thanks, Felix.
My pleasure. Okay, take care. Nice to have you on the call here. Right, guys, I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a really unusual breakdown of a company that I never had heard of. And it just goes to show here is a guy who's done some research and who's sitting there eating orange chicken and finds a bit of a treasure, at least in my view. If you want to find some more treasures, join me for the webinar this weekend and learn how to trade options for consistent income. And we're not talking here about crazy risk. We're talking here about very, very low risk. In fact, lower risk than stock trading, much, much lower risk, and how we can make lots of income from that in a relatively easy way that doesn't require any prior knowledge of options. So join me for that. It's going to be brilliant. felixfriends.org/webinar. There'll be a huge amount of value in there. If you join me for the last webinar, I think you'll know. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate if you follow Reilly on Twitter. He deserves it. And smash the like button and see you on the next one.